And welcome back to the Cool Jets podcast. Roast Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, sitting here Sunday morning after the Jets' final preseason game, a victory over the New York Giants. We are the Snoopy Bowl champions. Got to see Aaron Rodgers debut. Got to see every starter play. No major injuries. McCall Hartman did leave the game for a bit, but it seems like he's fine with that finger injury. A lot of good to break down from this game, but obviously hardest part of the season for NFL coaches and GMs, cutting down these rosters to 53 players. Teams have to have their rosters down to 53 by Tuesday at 4 p.m. So by the time you're listening to this, I imagine some cuts will have trickled through, but not all of them. And then we have that 24-hour period where we wait and see, will the Jets claim anybody off of waivers? Will Jets players get claimed off of waivers? They'll build that practice squad. They'll play some guys on IR and bring back some guys, and then I imagine Wednesday night, Thursday morning, they should have the final Week 153 finalized, in which case we'll come out with another podcast kind of breaking that all down. But in this one, I want to talk about the Giants game. I want to give our final 53-man roster predictions. We promised. We did count them ahead of time. There will be no more counting drama. But with all that said, Michael, how are you doing? And how nervous were you when Aaron Rodgers was taking his first few snaps as a member of the Jets, and you have Billy Turner protecting his blind side? It's a meaningless preseason game. We've seen Jets quarterbacks get injured before against the Giants in the preseason. Just take us through your experience watching Aaron Rodgers' first few snaps.
Well, I was definitely nervous, and as I said on this podcast last week, I was in the camp that was opposed to playing him in the preseason at all. So seeing him out there was exciting, but at the same time, I was just crossing my fingers, like, get that ball out quick. We don't need to see anything crazy. But after a few plays, I kind of got the feel of understanding that the Jets knew that, and they weren't going to put him in any risky situations. They were getting it out quick. There were bootlegs, things like that. And he was protecting himself by, checking into quick passes and things like that. So
Wink Martindale coming out with loaded box cover zero blitzes.
You come out, open the preseason. He's like, we're not screwing around. We're going to take you out. Almost Greg Williams-esque.
Rex Ryan.
Yeah, totally. So they were just going all out immediately. So there was sort of some fear when you saw that, like, all right, he better get that ball out. But after a few plays, I kind of felt like, all right, I think Rodgers and the Jets understand what the deal is here. There aren't going to be any risks taken. And so after that, I was kind of able to sit back and just enjoy the show. And this is where I think it really set in for the first time that, Aaron Rodgers is the Jets quarterback. And there have been a lot of different moments throughout the offseason, whether it was the trade finally becoming official and him showing up to the facility, him putting on the helmet and being in practices for the first time, or, whatever it may be, all these different moments where it was like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is the Jets quarterback, but nothing compares to him actually playing in a game and being able to visibly see in a game what he can do to change the team. So it was really cool to see. And obviously the cherry on top being the touchdown was great, but even just throughout both the first drive and the second drive, the way he's able to command the offense, that's the thing that stood out the most. So it was a fun experience once we kind of settled in and were able to understand he's going to be safe.
Yeah, I'm happy they played him. Obviously the injury risk was there, and it was a little scary those first few snaps, especially without having Dwayne Brown to protect his blind side. And we know some of the issues that Billy Turner has had. And then, the first few plays of the game, you're seeing, 9 guys in the box at the line of scrimmage. But I think it was a good experience. The Jets face a lot of great defensive lines in the first few weeks of the season. Rodgers is going to have to get the ball out quick. He's going to have to deal with a lot of those pressure looks. New England and Miami run a lot of those cover zero packages anyway. So I'm glad he got to shake off some of the rust, got to experience, a number of first time in a Jets uniform, first time playing at MetLife, debut of the season. So I think it just anything to kind of help alleviate some of that pressure on that opening game of the season. And you even saw, he had the miss to Uzama. I think some of those, just kind of first game of the year, butterflies, stuff like that. And also I think, just getting able to be with the starting offense, practice through some of like setting protections. And, so much of this Jets offense is based off of option routes and choice routes. And you really got to see that. That touchdown to Garrett Wilson was apparently a run play. He does a no-look hand signal to Garrett and changes it to a fade. And, that's that veteran quarterback presence, not just the ability to do that, but then obviously the ridiculous ball placement on the throw. But a number of plays were like that, where it's option routes for the receivers, and Rodgers and his receiver have to be on the same page. So I think there's a lot of value to just getting those two series. I know it wasn't that many plays, but I think overall it was the right call. I guess let's talk more about his debut. We'll get to some of the other stuff, but starting offense as a whole, what did you make of some of the first few plays and some of the play call? Because I feel like we got to see a little bit more of what this Jets offense is going to look like now with Rodgers under center.
Yeah, I think we got to see a little bit of a glimpse, but at the same time, they were definitely playing it on the safer side. But because they wanted to protect Rodgers and not take any of those chances, but even considering that, I do think that what we saw is going to be a big part of this offense, and that's having a guy under center who could make adjustments and get to the best play, and not always have to just ride or die with the play that was called. Because it really feels like the Jets in recent years have been forced to do that too much because they've had young quarterbacks under center who have not been able to make those changes or haven't been trusted to by the coaches. So if the coach calls a play and the defense has the perfect coverage for it, we've just been riding with it and that's it. But now we have a guy who's able to see, like, okay, we're not going to run against a 9-man box. I got Garrett Wilson with a 10-yard cushion. I'm just going to flick the ball out to him and let him make a play. Or, same thing in the red zone. I see we got a loaded box. Garrett Wilson's getting pressed. I'm going to throw up a fade to him. So the ability to have a quarterback who can do that, I think that's the biggest thing Rodgers offers, even more so than the arm talent and all the physical traits, is the ability to operate the offense in that way, because that makes everyone else better and takes pressure off of their shoulders. So it really de-emphasizes the need to have everyone else on your offense playing at an elite level, because he's going to raise them up and make their jobs easier. The offensive line doesn't have to drop back into, like in this game, for example, I think they only had like 3 true pass sets out of the 12 pass snaps that they played. And that's something that he's going to do for the offensive line, because he can create snaps where you guys don't even have to block. You could take this play off because I'm just throwing a fade immediately. So it makes everyone's jobs easier, takes pressure off them. And that's the best thing he brings to the table. We saw that in this game.
Yeah, and you had that article last week after Corey Davis's retirement, kind of outlining the target share that you envision for the season. I know it's 2 drives and it's preseason. Lazard's not out there. You can't read too much into it, but at least you can read into the fact that Garrett Wilson is going to get a bazillion touches every single game, and you should definitely draft him. And I would say in the first round if you play fantasy football. I missed out on him in my draft, and I'm still pissed about it. But I think this guy is going to, if he stays healthy, is going to have an absolutely ridiculous season, because you could just see already the connection that him and Rodgers share. And a lot of that is mentally. A lot of credit has to go to Garrett as well. It's not just his ability as a receiver physically and what he's been able to do last year as a route runner and the hands that he has and physical traits, but it's clear that Rodgers trusts him and trusts that mental side of him to be able to identify, okay, this corner's playing off coverage, inside leverage. This is what I'm going to do in this play. And I think that connection is going to be special. So what did you kind of make of the target share of Garrett Wilson? And then I also noticed, we were talking about before, like Conklin had the first touch, or I think it was like on the second play of the game, and then Cobb had that ridiculous penalty. But then I noticed Conklin was out and Uzama was in a lot. So kind of what did you make of some of the target share of these starting weapons and how they used them?
Well, Garrett being featured is definitely kind of what I figured we would see, not just in this game, but throughout the entire season. It really does feel like Garrett is in for a huge, huge number of targets this season, probably at least 10 a game. I think he's going to be in that Devontae range where he's
For sure.
170, 180 targets, something like that. And that's what I had in my prediction, for especially after Corey Davis went out. With Davis, maybe it's a little less dominant, but even with Davis, I think it was always on track to be, copying that kind of mold that the Packers had with Devontae Adams, where he was running the show, he was getting almost a third of all the targets. And then everyone else after that, they get to slide into a role that makes sense for them, smaller volume, spreading the ball around to everybody, all 3 positions. And you can do that because you have one guy at the top who's that good. And I believed Garrett Wilson, and still believe, because he has to prove it, but believe Garrett Wilson can match Devontae Adams in that way. And in this one game, granted, preseason, we were going to put that asterisk on everything, but he was targeted 4 times out of the 9 passes that Rodgers threw. So it definitely feels like that was an indicator of what we're going to see throughout this year. And obviously there will be times where teams are going to double him and they're going to make the Jets go to other players, and that will bring the target share down at times. But I think what this game showed is that, especially because the Giants were playing it the way that they were, I mean, man coverage on the outside, no safeties, box loaded. In those situations, I think Rodgers is going to take Garrett Wilson every single time or close to it. So over the course of the season, other things will happen. The ball will get spread around. You won't see him get like half the throws as he did in this game. And Lazard also didn't play, like you said. But if you give him those favorable matchups, Rodgers is always going to take it. And then as for the usage of other players, it was definitely kind of hard to gauge it because, Brees and Cook didn't play. I feel like the running backs will be a big part of the passing game as well. So we didn't get to see a ton of the involvement from those guys. I still think Conklin's going to be the number one tight end by far. I think he's going to be the number 2 target overall on this team. I feel confident that he's going to establish himself as that because I just think Rodgers is going to trust his route running in his hands more so than any of the other regular pass catchers on this team. I think Conklin's probably the second most polished route runner and has the second best hands. Maybe Cobb's in that discussion, but obviously he's much.
Well, that's the other guy, Cobb over Hardman. Cobb was their starting receiver outside and 12 personnel and 11 personnel. So what'd you make of that too?
Yeah, I do see Cobb out targeting. It'll be close because I think Hardman gives you obviously explosiveness that Cobb is bringing at this stage of his career. But even at this point of his career, I think Cobb gives better route running, more reliable hands, plus the chemistry that he has built up with Rodgers. Although in this game, there was that one route where they were kind of not in sync on that one option route, so it didn't come into play there. But in general, I think that will be valuable. And I think you see it on improvised plays too, because you pointed this out to me. If you look at the film of the replay film, whatever, of the play where Rodgers scrambled and threw the ball away, you could see that Cobb had improvised and felt out Rodgers' movements. He was wide open for 25, 30 yards. Oh, yeah. If Rodgers doesn't score a trip, potentially could have scored. So that's something Cobb has done really well too. He's been very good with Rodgers on those improvised plays. I think from all those years of playing with him, he knows where to sit in the middle of the defense to make himself an option for Rodgers on those plays. So I do think Cobb is going to out-target Hardman, but I feel like in running situations, like if it's first down or if you have 12 personnel, there's 2 tight ends out there, and you have 2 receivers, I feel like Hardman in those situations is going to be used a lot because, like, if it's 1st and 10, the run's a threat, I think that's when Hardman's jet motion is really going to make defenses respect him. More so, like, if it's a 3rd down, I think that's where Cobb is going to significantly outsnap Hardman because 3rd down, we know you're passing. Jet motion's not really a threat. I'd rather just have the guy who could straight up win more consistently than Hardman. But 1st down, I think he's going to make some plays on those jet sweeps, and it'll demand respect. And then you could open up the run game. Like, he can be a pseudo run blocker in that way. That's one of the big benefits of jet motion is not just making plays when you get the ball, but also the respect that you demand creates running lanes. So I think Hardman's going to get snaps in those situations. I see them being pretty close.
You already saw it. You already saw him do that when they threw it to him.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to say he danced a little bit too much for my liking.
It was a weird play. I was like, what is it? I mean, I guess he knew he had such a speed advantage. He could play around a little bit and then still get the first anyway. But I was kind of like, where is he going? He's kind of squeezed to the sideline. Can you get that 1st down? But he ended up getting it, so it was all good.
Yeah, and I think JT O'Sullivan does those great breakdowns every week where he broke down Rodgers' debut, and he pointed this out. And this is something that's always bothered me because I've seen Gase do it and I saw LaFleur do it. But a lot of times when you see any play where the Jets are going to accept that they're going to have a free rusher and you're going to roll into them, the Jets, at least for this, they went heavy on the left side. They had a tight end and they had Hardman motioning left. So it was just a really wide front for that free rusher to get to Rodgers. And then obviously Rodgers was chirping with him afterwards. But I think I just have flashbacks. I'm trying to remember exactly which play it was, but it was something like Darnold's first year with Gase or whatever. But they would have free rushers, right off the right tackle with no tight end, no receiver in motion, nothing. And that, that defensive end
sometimes
just
up the middle Darnold in that see and ghost game. There were a few that came straight through like A gap and B gap. But I know that's not your point, but it was that bad.
No, seriously though. But that's that familiarity with Rodgers and Hackett. I mean, yes, this is a first-year offense, but Rodgers and Hackett, Lazard, Cobb, all these guys have been, Bailey Turner, I guess, have all been in this offense for years now, and you're going to see it grow throughout the season. But clearly, that comfort and that familiarity is there with all the checks that they're making at the line, the options that they're and different that they have in different situations. I just loved getting to see a veteran Jets quarterback, just the calming presence of Rodgers and just like the subtle little nuances and the way he moves in the pocket and his play fakes. It was an absolute pleasure to watch, and I can't believe we have to wait 2 more weeks until the first week of the season. Starting defense. Also got to see them a little bit. Only played a little bit, but got to see a few sacks. Got to see Sauce with the big play. Sauce almost got beat on the first play of the game, but it was a bad throw. And I do trust Sauce's makeup ability and ability to kind of break up those deep balls. But overall, a flawless performance, I would say, from the starting defense. Any thoughts on those guys? Got to see Tony Adams for the first time?
Yeah, I actually did focus in and watch all of Tony Adams' snaps because I was curious. We haven't seen him play this preseason. This is our starting free safety. Hasn't played any snaps yet, and there's nothing really to write home about. He was never featured in the play at all, but he looked really aware with his coverage assignments, passing stuff off, picking up the routes that came into his area, just things like that. And I saw him used in a few different ways. They didn't have him as the free safety every single time. There were a couple snaps where Jordan Whitehead was deep and Tony Adams dropped down. So I think we'll see some interchangeability between them, which I don't know if I agree with that because I don't think Whitehead deep is ideal, but we did see some of that. So, and it is good for like disguise purposes. You don't want to just straight up play the same thing every time. So I did see some of that with the safeties, but I mean, overall the starting defense did its job. Giants were playing their backups. You want to completely dominate that unit as a starting defense that hopes to be top 5 in the league, top 3 hopefully. So and they were able to do that. And Jermaine had another active game.
Jeez.
He's just been really coming on throughout this preseason. I mean,
that draft class is unbelievable. We already knew that, but like just the fact that he's like the cherry on top because we didn't talk about him that much last year because Garrett and Sauce got all the attention and Brees, but he's really turning into a legit. I mean, we'll see. It's preseason. I don't want to oversell it, but I'll put it this way: he's definitely taking Carl Lawson's starting spot, injury or not.
Yeah, and it is preseason, but what is exciting for me is that compared to last year's preseason, it's still a step up versus that because last year's preseason, he didn't really stand out that much. He was kind of just a guy out there. He made some plays, but considering it was preseason competition, he didn't stand out amongst those players. But throughout this preseason, and this was the same thing for Bryce Huff and Will McDonald, which shows how deep this unit is. Whole preseason, Johnson, Huff, McDonald looked like they didn't belong out there. Like it was unfair for those offensive linemen they were facing. So that's what's exciting for me with Johnson is that he clearly looks improved versus where he was at this point last year. And we'll see if it does translate, but considering that improvement, I think there's a very good chance that it will. And that's not to say he'll be a superstar or anything, but we already know he's a great run defender. I think he'll get even stronger and more consistent in that area this year. And then the pass rushing, I think last year, he was, I would say, towards the bottom in terms of overall consistency with pressures and stuff like that. But this year I could see him becoming pretty solid as a pass rusher to complement what he does against the run. So just a balanced two-way defensive end. I could see him being that this year.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what our stat predictions were for this unit in terms of sacks, but I think whatever it was, it needs to be higher because the fact that Jermaine Johnson has turned into this finisher, what we're seeing from Bryce Huff and Will McDonald, on top of what we already know that they have in Quinn and JFM and the vets they brought in from Seattle. This is a unit that is going to be a nightmare every single week for quarterbacks. And we already knew that before this game, but it was nice to kind of get a glimpse of it in action. The other guy that we say this all the time that doesn't get nearly enough credit, Michael Carter II made a tremendous play. I think it was like the second play of the game, breaking up that screen pass to Cager. He doesn't get nearly enough love, but he's a huge part of this defense. So yeah, pretty great opening for the Jets for their starters. Going to the backups, what did you make of Zach Wilson's performance? I know he didn't have necessarily the big play that he, the first game against the Browns, he had the deep bond with Malik Taylor. Last week against the Bucs, he had the big scramble. This game, kind of missing that big play. He could have had it on his last throw of the game to E.J. Jenkins, which probably his worst play of the game. He missed him. Would have been 6. But besides that, I thought Zach actually played pretty well. I mean, he was victim to some drops, but I thought he looked more confident, was airing it out. I think you can definitely see you saw some growth from what he was last year to now. And yeah, it's preseason going up against backups, but still you can't overstate that mental side of things and that confidence. And I think you saw Zach look a lot more confident. His mechanics looked better. His accuracy looked better. Ball placement was nice in this game. So what did you make of Zach's performance in this game? And I guess preseason as a whole?
Yeah, I like the way he played in this game because going in, I did want to see him show some more aggressiveness. This being his last preseason game before the regular season starts, because first 3 games he was good and I liked the way he played, but he was definitely really conservative. He had the lowest average depth of target of any qualified quarterback in the league over those first 3 games. So, which I think made sense for his development because you think about where he's at. He's trying to reset after how last season went down, which was really rough. It was tumultuous. He's getting a lot of criticism, and his game was just reckless and it was all over the place. So I think him being extremely conservative those first 3 games, it made sense because he's just trying to get back to basics, learn a new system, and just recalibrate, get back to square one, and build it from there. So it made total sense, and I thought he played good, even though it was a safe style. He was consistent, making safe decisions, took care of the ball, was methodical. So I liked the first 3 games. He was pretty good, but definitely safe. So going into this last game, want to see him air it out a little bit and the Jets to give him those chances because they definitely didn't call it aggressively for him either over those first 3 games. So it was a little bit of both the way it was called and how he played. So I want to see more aggression in this game, and I think we saw it. It's not to say he was bombs away the whole game, but he was trying tight window throws. He was taking some chances, looking to make some plays, and he had some really good throws that just didn't get completed. There was obviously the deep bomb to Hardman, which was one of the best throws I think he's ever made in the league. I mean, the way he stood tall in the pocket there with clear pressure coming right at him, was unfazed, stood there and made that throw. That is something that we have not seen a lot from him in the league. He's hit some throws when he's been clean, such as that Malik Taylor bomb in the first game, but this one was pressured and he still stood in there and made that play. He didn't run backwards, didn't try to create, stood tall and made the throw. I love that. That's something that we've been missing, that he's been missing from his game throughout his career so far. But that was a fantastic throw. Hardman just couldn't make the catch. It was very well defended by the defender, got his hand in there. But in terms of the throw by Wilson, I think couldn't have been any better. Then there was the sidearm throw close to the goal line that he had to Gibson, which, again, tightly covered. Great play on the ball by the defender. But another pressure throw. He uses the unique arm angle to get it around, and he threw a dart into the hands of Gibson. So he had some good throws like that got dropped. But overall, he did have some misses as well. There were a couple little stretches in there where the offense was erratic and couldn't really get anything going. So, and that's kind of been the theme of this preseason. He hasn't been extremely consistent. There have been some ups and downs, but for the most part, I think he's been more stable than he was last year and to the level that you'd like to see from a backup quarterback. He has looked like a guy who, say it's halftime and you're up by 7 and you need him to come in the second half and hold that lead for you. He looks like a guy who you can trust to do that. So versus last year where, favorable situations, playing a bad Lions defense, he couldn't take advantage of those opportunities. The Jaguars game where they hung around and they had a chance at home to win a gritty game, couldn't even do that. So you compare to where he was last year and you keep the expectations realistic and understand we're looking at the backup quarterback right now. I think within that lens, he's had a very solid preseason. Long term, we'll see what happens. If he can get back to being the guy who was drafted second overall, be that franchise quarterback, that's a conversation for another day. But if we're just talking about the backup quarterback for the Jets, can we trust him? I think this preseason added a lot of faith in that.
Yeah, and I think Boyle looked pretty good too. I know he's friend of the pod. Don't want to be a shill here, but I think Boyle, especially in this last game, looked like he had a great grasp of the offense and was able to move the ball up and down the field. And I think Zach is clearly QB2, but the quarterback room as a whole, I feel pretty solid about. We'll see if Boyle makes the final team. He'll definitely be in the quarterback room, whether he's a practice squad or if he's QB3 on the 53. Sala was talking about that 3 QB rule and how that is a big help. So that should bode well for Boyle's chances of making this roster. But we'll see. Overall, I think the QBs did a pretty good job in this preseason. And like you said, I think our confidence in Zach as a backup quarterback has definitely grown exponentially. We'll see how he develops throughout the season. Hopefully we don't see him again until next preseason. But we'll see how he develops with a full season sitting behind, learning behind Rodgers, getting those reps in practice, see what he looks like next spring OTAs. If we have to see him this season, statistically speaking, we probably will. I do feel a lot more confident in his ability to kind of keep the ship afloat. Let's do some stock up, stock down from the entirety of preseason. Then we'll give our final 53-man roster predictions, and we also have a prediction for the practice squad. Um, I sent you. We compiled a list beforehand, but let's just start with some of the stock ups. I think the biggest stock up out of anybody throughout training camp and preseason has to be Mekhi Becton. I don't think anybody. I mean, Roger said it himself, but I don't think anybody has grown more this last month from Becton, who seemed to be in the doghouse, getting third team left tackle reps, to now the starting right tackle. Fan base is behind him. Seems like the team's behind him. And he put himself, he did all that work to get back here after 2 years off, being out of shape, getting in shape, building back confidence in a twice surgically reconstructed knee, and playing a different position too. He's looked good in preseason, and he's had a good training camp as well. So I'm excited for Becton, and I really just hope he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, from the start, it was always a situation where you were hoping for the best, but also prepared for the worst, just because, Becton's run into a lot of hard luck in his career to this point. So, and I've been on record saying, and I think you agree, but I'm not 100% sure, but that, they shouldn't have trusted Becton going into the season. They should have added another starter just because of those concerns, but they showed faith in him. And there was that report also recently that, or not a report, actually Orlando Brown said it himself, that the Jets did offer more money. So I think the Jets did try to upgrade. So it's not like they went all in on Becton, but nevertheless, it played out the way that it did. And Becton came into training camp as a guy with a chance to start and easily the most talented tackle on the team. And it was a long process. They had that plan for him that we learned about recently, ramping up, starting at left tackle, gradually working his way to right tackle, and every step of the way he's done his part, and I've been really impressed with, and Rodgers has talked about it, and I mean, it more so because Rodgers has said it, but it seems like his mindset is better. Like, we're not seeing as much of the drama on social media, and that, like, when he's out there playing, he's got a mean streak, but it also seems like he's having fun, and that he's really assimilating into the culture of the team, just has a good mindset. So everything has gone as planned really since training camp started, and we'll see how it goes throughout the season, but up to this point he's checked every box, and he finally looks ready to build on the potential he showed as a rookie.
Yeah, another one, Zach Wilson. We already just talked about him, but I would say his stock is definitely up. The one that definitely the biggest one that jumped out from this game in particular, but I think you can say preseason and training camp as a whole, and somebody who I think has a pretty good chance of making the 53 now, Xavier Gibson. Really impressed with what he did in this Giants game. A number of times where he caught the ball short of the sticks and was able to make a man miss and get the first down. He moved the chains a lot. He was their first team punt returner and kick returner, so that also bodes well. And also, Rodgers came out in the post game press conferences and was talking about what Xavier did in that game. So I feel pretty good about Gibson's chances of making this team now. We'll see if he's active on game days to start the year, but this is a guy that should be their starting punt returner and kick returner if he is active. And if not, throughout the season with injuries hitting and stuff, I feel like this is a guy that you'll see get worked into the lineup because he's electric with the ball in his hands. He can make guys miss. So really, really happy that at least one of these young receivers was able to flash in this game to feel confident about, their potential, especially after a week in which you lose arguably your second best receiver.
Yeah, he did a great game, and the yak skills that he showed is what impressed me the most. I mean, I believe he had 4 missed tackles forced after the catch. He had 70 yards after the catch on 7 catches, so he looked really shifty with the ball in his hands, had good field vision, and I think that's something that the Jets are going to like in a receiver in this offense, because the new Rodgers over the past few years, he's been very yak reliant. He will take his deep shots now and then, but in those 2 MVP years, he led the league in yak per completion in 2020. Then he was 4th in 2021, and in air yards per completion, he was down in the 20s. So more so than most quarterbacks, he profits off of that yak. He wants to make throws that are safe, high percentage, and give guys chances to make plays. And those are the type of catches that Gibson has been making this preseason, and he's shown that he can make plays after the catch with those opportunities. So I think he's a good fit for what the philosophies of this team is going to be. And the special teams ability is an added bonus. I'm not sure he's going to be the week one returner, but just to be able to have that ability is an added bonus because he had, I think, 3 big returns this preseason. He had the big kickoff return, and he had a 31-yard punt return and a 20-yard in this game. So he showed that as well. So out of all the receivers, he definitely shined the most this preseason, and specifically with this Giants game, this was a huge stock raiser for him. It was the best individual performance of any receiver this preseason. And we've been waiting for one of these guys to stand out because we've heard a lot out of practice, but hasn't really translated to the games. But Gibson finally did it in this Giants game. So you got to like his chances, especially after Corey Davis's retirement.
Yeah, another undrafted free agent who I thought definitely helped the stock throughout these training camp practices and preseason, Trey Dean.
Yeah.
And we'll see what the Jets ultimately do, but he's definitely earned not a starting spot, but he's at least earned a spot in this 53. We'll see if they go with Ashton Davis over him. We'll see if they keep 5 safeties. I think the fact that cutting Davis at nearly $3 million is going to help his case tremendously. But Davis also had a nice preseason. I think, I guess for the sake of time, we'll lump him in here as well. But both Davis and Dean, I would say their stocks are up. But Dean is an undrafted free agent. And the cheaper of the 2 players looked good on special teams as well, which is really the reason Ashton Davis has survived these last few years because he hasn't been very good at safety. Both those players, their stocks up. But Dean in particular, I'm very high on, again, friend of the pod. So we don't be too much, we don't shill too much, but really happy with what Trey Dean was able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that, he was playing really well from the start. We kind of didn't begin to talk about it until after the 3rd game, but the whole time he was such a consistent tackler, and he was doing it in a variety of different ways, whether it was coming from a deep alignment in the box, off the edge, doing all sorts of different things for the defense and handling all of his responsibilities very consistently and soundly. And he's hit hard. He's hit with good form. It's not like he's making a bunch of dive tackles or trip tackles. We've seen good head-up tackles from him. So I really enjoyed watching him play. And to me, it's pretty clear that he deserves to have that 4th safety spot, but we'll see what happens.
Obviously, Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, let's just lump them into one group here as the young edge rushers. Their stock is all the way up, particularly Jermaine Johnson. We already talked about them, but can't do this segment without mentioning them. They definitely helped their stock this preseason. But outside of that, I think the 3rd team defensive line also had, some good moments, and a lot. I think some of those guys are going to get claimed by other teams, or at the very least make the Jets practice squad. Tanzel Smart, Karkuchi board. I think he had a nice preseason like he's had the last few years. Pita Tau, I'm going to mess up this name. We were trying it beforehand. It was, what is it? Pita Tau Menapau or Tau Mopanu? Tamopanu, right?
I'm Googling it right now. I had it pulled up. We got
Tamoipanu.
Fuck.
He looked pretty good though. I think he's had a couple sacks in preseason, and he's somebody who's really flashed me in a few of his reps. So I think he's definitely a practice squad candidate for sure. Definitely built in that solid mold. And then even guys like Bruce Hector had the forced fumble against Carolina. I noticed Deslin Alexandre a few times on run plays. So that's 3rd wave of defensive linemen who there's not really a spot for them on the team. Impressed, and I think they've earned a spot on at least his practice squad, or at least somebody else's practice squad. So I thought we should throw them in there as a stock up mention. If you don't have any thoughts on the 3rd string offensive line or defensive line, let's talk about some of the backup offensive linemen, particular Wes Schweitzer, the guy that I think you and I were both not too high on. Not to say we were Wes Schweitzer, doubters, but I think you and I both kind of preferred Cologne just from what we had seen in their tape at, with the Commanders versus the Ravens. But Schweitzer impressed me in preseason. I think he shows a nice push in the run game. Looked pretty good in pass protection as well. Again, preseason, we'll see him against starters. But number of snaps, versatile offensive lineman. Definitely a guy you feel confident about if injuries hit. And also if injuries hit at tackle and they have to move AVT out, I think Tittman is probably who you'd want to see, but it seems like Schweitzer might be ahead of him. So I feel pretty good about Wes Schweitzer, in terms of the interior offensive line depth.
Yeah, I like the way he played this preseason. He was pretty consistent in pass protection, especially, I think. And, I think whenever you're looking at backup offensive linemen in particular, but really any position, when you're looking at backups, you have to understand what the measuring stick is. Like, no backup is good compared to a starter. Every backup is a drop off compared to the starters, or else they would be starting. So you have to compare them versus the other backups in the league. And I think Wes Schweitzer, among backup guards, interior linemen in the league, I think he's above average. So I think you could do a lot worse than him, and we've seen a lot worse with this team in recent years. So uh, yeah, it's not to say he's a world beater or anything, but I mean, as specifically a guard, I think I trust him. At center, he's been worse as a starter than as a guard, specifically last year. So center, I don't know if I really trust him there, and obviously Tippmann, I think, is first in line to replace McGovern anyway. But at guard, I like Schweitzer, probably on the higher end of backup guards.
Tippmann, I think also I would say stock up. I know some Jets fans are hoping that he would beat out McGovern for that starting spot. So, but I think overall, just the way that he played in the games, you have to be pretty excited about his potential to develop. And it seems like Rodgers wants that veteran center. We'll see what happens throughout the season with Tippmann if he gets some reps. But I would say overall stock up just from what you got to see in those preseason games, and also got to display some of that versatility playing the guard position as well as a center. I'd say the one thing with Tippmann that I just noticed is that we talked about it, but the snaps, especially out of shotgun, need some work.
Yeah.
So that's something for him to develop. But he definitely, as a blocker, impressed in these games. Let's stick with the offensive line. I have two starting guys who have been criticized by this fan base. One in particular I've been very critical of that I think has had a nice camp. And one in particular you've been very critical of that I would also say has had a nice camp. We'll see how they look in the regular season. Maybe they have just been overshadowed because the tackles have been so bad. But Connor McGovern and Laken Tomlinson, I think they had a nice training camp. And I think, again, this game, it's hard to really judge too much, but I'm going a little bit back to the Carolina game as well. I think these two guys have had a nice summer. McGovern in particular, but Laken has looked pretty good in every snap that he's had in preseason. Again, we'll see what happens in the regular season. Maybe he was just, dodging some criticism because the tackles were so bad. But I think McGovern and Laken had a nice summer.
I agree. Yeah, they played well in the preseason, sound and consistent, not a ton of mistakes, and small sample. We'll see if it translates, but good to see because Laken Tomlinson's a huge X factor this year. I mean, this is a guy who you gave a lot of money to, who came in off of a Pro Bowl.
What's he getting paid this year? $17 million?
I'm going to pull it up right now, but
something
I
absurd.
believe it's something around that. Like, this guy's getting paid a lot of money. He should be one of your
second
best
highest
players.
paid player.
And you'd expect a lot of impact out of him. So after last year, at the very least, we'll sign up for average. But, there's the potential for him to be a lot better. He has been a lot better in previous years. So, cap hit this year, 10.88 this year, but it goes up to 18.88 next year.
Good luck.
Yeah, and they're not getting out of it, so he's going to be here. So and
they
that's
can't cut him after this year.
Didn't he get restructured this year, or am I wrong? But either way, looking at Spot Track, still it's a lot more dead cap than savings if they cut him next year. So probably not even worth it unless he's utterly atrocious. Spot Track is saying if they cut him next year, it's 10.7 mil in dead cap, 8.1 saved. So probably not worth it unless he's terrible. But either way, this is a guy who's getting paid a lot of money. You expect impact, and he's played well in the preseason, so hopefully he can translate.
I guess last one. I get one that I didn't put down here, but I'll throw him in, although it was questionable if he deserves this. But Chaz Surratt didn't play the second and third preseason games, but had a great first game. And then he made a few plays in this last game. Saul loves him just from that one clip on Hard Knocks where he said, God, I love that guy. But we'll see if he did enough to make the final roster. I think most people think that the Jets will go with 4 linebackers. We'll see if they stick on 5. It is an important special teams position. But I think he's at the very least earned himself a spot on the practice squad. And injuries hit, that's a guy that should get activated. But last one, the veteran special teamers. Greg Zuerlein, Thomas Morstead had a great preseason. Zuerlein only missed that one kick, but outside of that was money. Morstead had a number of nice punts. And it feels good that the Jets have veteran special teamers. I don't have to hold my breath every time the Jets are back to punt or to, have to make a chip shot field goal. I feel pretty good about this unit, and that's a must if you're in a Super Bowl year. If you don't have any thoughts on those guys, we can go to the stock down.
Not too many thoughts because I think that's the thing. The less you're thinking about them, the better they're playing. I don't think Morstead at this point is at the latter stage of his career, so he won't be the best punter in the league, but he's going to be consistent and sound. You're not going to see shanks. I think that's what we've seen from him, a lot of consistency. And he's still got plenty of leg left, so he is one of the best punters in the league still, I think. And even in coverage, like, and we saw it on Hard Knocks, like, he still got some wheels too. So, yeah, between this duo and Zerline, I think maybe a little overrated just in the sense that, the Jets kickers have been so bad that last year he was looked at as a savior when he did miss some kicks. And overall, he was, probably above average, not great. So maybe a little overrated in that sense, but he's solid. And the fact that he can hit those deep, deep kicks, I think is a very valuable trait.
All right, let's do some stock down. Enough of this positivity. We'll start with your guy, Zonovan Knight. Tough summer for Zonovan.
Yeah.
Although I will say, tough
Less
summer,
more preseason.
More preseason, because the first half of the summer when we had Robbie on, he was like, Zonovan's been their best running back in camp. Granted, Brees was injured. Dalvin wasn't practicing. I think he's only just now started practicing. But at the start of camp, Zonovan was ahead of Michael Carter and Abanikanda, but it seems like he's fallen behind. I think it's maybe unfair to say that he's had a bad summer, but definitely had too many mistakes in those preseason games to earn that spot over Michael Carter, and might have been bad enough for him to sneak back onto the Jets practice squad, which is what I'm hoping for, because you saw it last year. You've seen some flashes. He's a good. He can be a good player, and running backs, are very interchangeable in today's NFL. So I'm hopeful that the Jets can stash him on their practice squad this year, but overall has to be stocked down for your guy.
Yeah, ever since it's really correlated directly with when I started to praise him. Before that, it was all good, and I'm not saying hopped on the bandwagon because I was a fan last year, but I voiced my support, and then ever since then, it's been downhill, which tends to happen when I am a huge fan of players. But yeah, the preseason's been rough for Zonovan. Just as a rusher, we haven't seen the same elusiveness that he showed in spurts last year. It feels like he gets tackled in every one-on-one. He had technically 2 fumbles. The first one got called back, but it was very close. Easily could have stood. So the ball security, that's been an issue. He's had some drops. Overall, it's just been pretty rough for him. So, yeah, I do think his blocking has been pretty good, especially in this last game. He had some really good blocks that I think not a lot of running backs would make, especially on this team. So at least he does have this trait. But other than that, it's been rough. So we'll see if he can get on to the practice squad. I still believe in his potential, but hasn't been able to perform enough this preseason to where you think he'll make the roster.
Travis Dye as well, another running back who was maybe fighting to make a practice squad push, especially if the Jets had to cut one of these running backs and they got claimed. You were hoping that Dye could make a push to land on the practice squad, but I don't think Dye has shown you anything that would justify a practice squad spot. So I think he's, definitely not. I don't think he's making the practice squad. So I'll say stock down for him. Another stock down, Jason Brownlee, who had a good summer, I would say, in terms of training camp practices, but I don't necessarily know if he popped as much in the preseason games. I think he had some nice moments last week against Tampa Bay, and he had a nice catch in this game as well. So to say stock down doesn't necessarily say this guy's a bum or anything, but I think especially entering this game, you were hoping that he could maybe have a big game to justify a spot in the final 53, feel good about his potential. I think he's heading towards the practice squad and somebody that they're going to try to develop throughout the season. Definitely a lot of athletic traits that you really like and are hopeful to see develop throughout the season, but I don't think he's making the final 53. So I'll stay stock down.
Agreed, because I think going into preseason, he was like the consensus top receiver in this competition, and a lot of people had him making their roster. So yeah, the preseason he was okay. Like there were some flashes, but not enough to where, to match the hype that he had coming in. And I think Gibson eventually outshined him. So didn't quite live up to the hype. Still has a chance to make the roster, but just wasn't quite as impressive as you thought based on the chatter you were hearing out of training camp.
Yeah, 2 other stock downs, Max Mitchell, Billy Turner, struggled all summer. I think Mitchell, the team is pretty high on, and I think in pass protection he's okay. Obviously, gets beat every once in a while, but the run game for Mitchell has really been a struggle this preseason, has too many plays that stand out as negatives. Again, he's somebody that I think you're hopeful can develop. I mean, he was a 4th-round pick last year, then had an illness pop up and was missed the end of last year, and we're not necessarily sure how much that affected his training, his ability to put on weight, his spring. So hard to judge him. I think he's still a guy that they'd like to develop, and we'll see if Becton is to go down. Is it Turner? Is it Mitchell who slides in there? Is it AVT sliding over? But overall, I would say Mitchell and Turner had stock down from at least kind of what we were hoping for at the start of training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going off what we just said about Schweitzer, with him seeming like a good backup relative to the rest of the league, I think the way that Mitchell and Turner played, you don't feel the same way about them as backups. So I think I'm concerned about them as depth going into this year, because even against preseason competition, they were unable to stand out and often struggled. Specifically, Mitchell in the run game was, he really struggled there. I mean, Turner maybe a little less. I don't know. Turner
we
didn't
get to see as much in preseason action, but we got
there were a lot of the training camp clips that
yeah,
fans share and stuff, and it felt like he was getting beat every single time. Which,
maybe
granted, we know who he's going
to,
against
yeah.
on his D line, but in the preseason, neither of them backed it up and were able to prove that, okay, let's go against some preseason guys and not Bryce Huff, and prove we can beat them. But they couldn't do that. So yeah, I'm skeptical of them as depth going into the year.
I'll also put Tristan Colon on this list, and not necessarily to say that I think he's been horrible or anything. I think he's a practice squad guy. But I was hoping to see him kind of push for a starting, or not a starting spot, but at least a spot on this 53-man roster. And I think between him and Schweitzer, Schweitzer's been far more impressive. Cologne's had a few misses, but overall, I think Cologne is great depth if you're able to get him on the practice squad. I think just relatively speaking, put him at stock down. There aren't too many guys I wanted to put on this stock down list. We have a few more. There are a few young guys, like, we contemplated some of those younger corners that have had some bad moments. Like Derek Langford had a tough game against Tampa Bay, but then he made a nice play against the Giants. And, it's some of those backup guys. It's like, okay, was there really much stock to begin with? Is it fair to be putting some of these guys on here? So obviously more guys in the stock up. But I'll say last 2 guys I want to put on the stock down, Jarek Bernard-Converse and Carter Warren, both going to be presumably making the 53, but then immediately put on IR. We'll see if either of them get activated. I would imagine middle of the year they probably will. But both of them missing their rookie training camp, and that's going to set them back a little bit developmentally as rookies. I think it is beneficial, though, the fact that they get to kind of have a redshirt year, though. They won't count on the 53 after they make that initial roster spot. And so I think overall it's probably a good situation for Warren in particular to kind of develop, be in an NFL building and an NFL conditioning room, and getting some practice reps. But once he gets activated, but overall these guys, I was hoping for them to get some of those training camp reps. JBC we didn't get to see at all. I'm not even sure what his injury necessarily is. But yeah, both those guys I just put stock down.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for them whenever you suffer an injury. And on that topic, another Jet player who had a pretty early injury in their career, Cameron Clark. I just want to bring this up because I don't know if we talked about it, but apparently he's been a mentor to Mekhi Becton, and very, very helpful in Becton's the year that he's had and his progress throughout the past month. So that's been good to see. So
does that count as a win for Joe Douglas's 2020 draft class? Is that another? Can we turn that?
I would say so, positive? Because I think he drafted him. He wouldn't be here if not for that. Jeez. So if he's helping Mekhi Becton, supplementing him, so I guess it's a little bit of a saving grace for that draft.
Oh, class. Sorry. Thank you for despite that being a complete non sequitur to what I had just said, it did remind me about one guy that I forgot to put on this list. But I would say stock down out of that 2020 draft class, Bryce Hall. Now, this will take us into our 53-man roster predictions, because I think you and I have kind of gone back and forth on whether or not Hall will make this roster. But the fact that he was playing deep into Saturday's game with those second stringer or with those third and fourth stringers doesn't necessarily bode well. He, like Ashton Davis, would free $2.7 million if cut. Athletically, he doesn't have the same traits as some of these other young guys and looks stiff out there. He did make a nice late breakup that was initially ruled a catch on third down. Does have the starting experience. I still think it's possible for him to stick. But overall, I think you have to stay stock down because it seems like it's very clear Eccles has surpassed him, and it's very possible that he gets cut. So what do you make of Bryce Hall's training camp and preseason?
I don't know. I think Hall is still on track to make the roster. He didn't have the best preseason in terms of standing out too much. And same goes for training camp, but I feel like he hasn't necessarily been terrible. He hasn't gotten beat a ton throughout the preseason.
Is it just me? Does he just look stiff to you? I guess this
He
is
is
kind
a
of with
big
DJ
corner,
Bien.
though. So,
Yeah, but
like,
so is Sauce. I know Sauce is a unicorn, but
you
when
can't
DJ
compare
was
anyone to
on,
him.
I know. But when DJ was on the pod, I think like 2 years ago, and he had said that they like Eccles more than Hall, and at the time we were like, what? And we looked like idiots. So shout out to DJ. He did literally text us this week after Eccles' pick six to remind us of that take. But he was right in the sense that Hall is just athletically limited. Like there's a ceiling. There's a reason that he was a 5th-round pick, despite some of the production and some of the stuff that he's able to do in college. There's a ceiling on what he's going to be able to be as an NFL corner because of his physical limitations. And in a division where you're going up against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, do you trust that Bryce Hall is going to be able to cover the deep third of the field or a quarter of the
Well,
field?
I
I don't
mean,
know.
what fourth cornerback would you trust to cover those
I
two
trust
guys?
Eccles more. Because Eccles got this. And if you're going to cut Hall, I mean, I think it's between Moreland, James, Langford, one of those guys
But that's
that
the thing.
you're
I
hoping
just
can.
don't think
Hold on, you're
anyone
hoping that
else showed anything. But yeah, go ahead.
you don't think I mean, did they show anything bad to you, Michael?
They did. I feel like the bottom of the roster corners are getting beaten pretty often, from what I remember.
I think you're biased against Craig James for missing that sack against Tampa Bay. But and Langford had, I guess, the miss. I feel like Moreland's going to make it. I mean, I guess we'll get into 53, but I have Moreland making it over Hall. I guess you're right in the sense that it's not like I have anything really to justify that outside of, I guess he had a few. I noticed a few plays he had, but he did give up a completion against. Who gave up the big touchdown in Cleveland? Was that Craig James?
Yeah, I think it was James.
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, some of these guys have had negative plays. I don't think one negative play is necessarily going to sink their chances. I think the point I'm making is Bryce Hall frees $2.7 million. And it's the same argument used for Ashton Davis. He's athletically limited. I think the Jets like their chances of developing one of these young, more athletically gifted corners in this scheme that is supposedly very corner friendly. We've seen how much better the defense can be when you have elite corner play. But this was our argument back in 2021. That if you have a great defensive line, the scheme takes a lot of pressure off the corners because they're playing a lot of zone, deep coverage. I think they'd like their chances of developing, a more athletically gifted corner than Bryce Hall. He just looks stiff to me, stiff in the hips, doesn't look that fast. I think he does a nice job of those late breakups, I guess, but he's never going to be a guy who's very active on the ball, getting a lot of interceptions. I don't know. I just feel like there's a cap there, and you'd free nearly $3 million cutting him. I think that these Jets coaches and Tony Oden are in that practice room, that cornerback room every single day watching practice with these guys. I bet you there's somebody in there that they like more than Bryce Hall, and we'll see who it is. But that's just my prediction. I agree that it's not like you've seen any. It's not like one of these backup corners has really flashed in particular. But I would bet you that there's somebody that in practice in the meeting rooms that they like a little bit more than somebody like Hall. I don't know. We'll see. It does free up the money, and it's the argument we used with Ashton Davis, who's
It could
definitely had a
happen.
better
It
summer.
could definitely happen. I feel like Hall's going to stick, but I could see that happening as well.
Why do you like Hall?
I like
What
his
does he bring
size and
you?
his ability to play the ball. I think in those situations where, I feel like, and we've seen this ever since like the 2021 offseason when he was matching up with Elijah Moore a lot. I think he does stick to receivers pretty well. He's just never been great at getting interceptions. And even in that touchdown he gave up against the Ravens in that one game last year, like that wasn't bad coverage. It was just an amazing throw. I feel like he does use his size to create contested windows. And in his the season he started in 2021, he had plenty of pass breakups, so I feel like he uses it. So I think he uses his size pretty well. He's just obviously got plenty of athletic limitations, like you said, but I think as a backup corner, he's a pretty solid piece.
All right. Let's start with 53-man roster then. I think the last one was it the last one or was it the one before that you had Nick Vigil making it, who did get cut? That's the
The
only
last
cut we
one.
know so far.
Yeah.
Well,
So that
so
didn't pan out.
well, there's at least one change then. I don't. Well, there's a few changes because Davis's retirement, and then this game had a few other impacts. But let's go through it. Start with the quarterbacks. Do you have Tim Boyle making the final roster? I went back and forth on this actually because I was listening to Salah's quote about the 3 QB rule. You know, I ultimately put him
I
in
don't
the
have him
practice
on my
squad. But
roster.
yeah, okay. I have both Rodgers and Wilson as your two QBs. Running backs, I don't think there should be any surprises here. I think we're both in agreement that Son of a Knight's going to get cut. But Hall, Cook, Carter, Abanikanda.
Yep. And are
And
we
we'll see
throwing Nick
about
Bawden in that? Well, you
Uh,
have him making the roster, right?
I do have Nick Bott. So again, I was going to say on Abanikanda, we'll see if he gets put on IR after making the team. It doesn't sound like it since it's a thigh bruise, but who knows? It could free up another roster spot. There's going to be a few of these guys, at least two. At least JBC and Carter Warren. So I have a total of 55 guys on my final 53 man roster. But I think there's a good chance Carl Lawson ends up on that list. So it might be three guys. I think there's a chance it could be maybe Abanikanda. That could be four. So we'll see. But right now, I'll just keep it to the two rookies. I do have Nick Bodden making the team, but I have him getting cut and then brought back after one of those guys gets placed on the on injured reserve. How do you see Nick Bodden? Do you think he makes the team?
Yeah, I think so. That's interesting that you have him in that way because I have him making it straight up.
I think he's just not going to get claimed, so might as well. He's one of those guys I think you can cut and bring back pretty easily.
That's true.
Receivers, this is the interesting spot. Garrett Wilson, Lazard, Hardman, Cobb, we know. I'll go to you first. How do you see, do 5 receivers or 6 receivers, and who are they?
I have 6, and I have Gibson and Taylor making it.
Damn, same. All right, exact same. I do have Taylor getting cut and brought back, though. He's the other guy that I have to make room. I think he's a guy that's not going to get claimed. He was injured and didn't play in this last game. But I do ultimately think he makes it because of the familiarity with the offense, with Rodgers. I thought he looked good in the first 2 preseason games. And he brings you something that Gibson, Cobb, Hardman, and don't. And that's size, ability to play on the outside, blocking, special teams. So I think Taylor's going to make this team. It was a toss-up between Erickson because I think Erickson made some nice plays, has a little bit more experience in the NFL, but I think Taylor's familiarity in the offense and comfort with Rodgers is what's going to give him the nod. But again, I think he gets cut and brought back. Tight end. I have 4, Conklin, Uzama, Rucker, and Kuntz. Did Kuntz make the cut for you? Because there was a big debate last time. You didn't have Kuntz making it. I'm not necessarily sure he's done anything in this last game to really justify making it, but I just think the ceiling and talent is there. It's a Joe Douglas draft pick. I think they like their chances of being able to develop him. And, Conklin, Uzama, I guess they restructured their deals, so maybe we'll see how long they stick around. But that was kind of like the point last year was that these veterans you're going to have for 2 years, and then maybe you're turning it over to Ruckert more. I just think, keeping a young guy you drafted with that athletic ceiling and an offense where you just lost Corey Davis, you're going to be playing a lot of 12 personnel. I think you want to go heavy on the tight ends here. And you could go Yeboah, who's maybe proven a little bit more, but I'm going to go with the Joe Douglas draft pick and give Zach Kuntz the roster spot. Let's hear it, Michael. 3 or 4, and does he make it?
I have 3 tight ends on my roster. I do not have Zach Kuntz making it. I just haven't seen enough. This game also he gave up a pressure as a blocker. Got beat on a couple run blocks. He doesn't do anything right now.
Is there any thought? Is there any thought to Yeboah then? I do feel like they're going to go 4 tight ends.
I am thinking about that because I do have one of my spots post players going on pup spots open. I haven't decided because I had Vigil in that spot last week. Obviously now he's gone, so I'm trying to decide who to replace him with, and I'm thinking maybe Yeboah because I don't think he gets claimed. He was a big special teams piece last year. You know what? I'm going to put him on there. I'm putting Yeboah on as my post players going on pup, making the roster guy.
I like that. I do think they're going to go 4 tight ends. I guess they have Bawden, so that's kind of he's like a pseudo 4th tight end. I just think Kuntz he'll be inactive on game days to start the season. I just think his ceiling is too high there, and I do think there's a chance he could get claimed just because there aren't many tight ends with that athletic score. And I don't know. I like his ability to develop throughout the season, so I think they'll keep him around. Offensive line should look the same, but I think we both have 10 at left tackle. We got at tackle we have Dwayne Brown, Mekhi Becton, Max Mitchell, Billy Turner, and Carter Warren. Warren getting sent to IR, and then in the interior we got Laken Tomlinson, McGovern, AVT, Tippmann, and Schweitzer. Any differences with you?
Yeah, I have the exact same.
All right, let's go to the defensive line, which I suspect will also be the same. We got JFM, Jermaine Johnson, Michael Clemens, Carl Lawson, Bryce Huff, McDonald at edge. Again, we'll see if Lawson gets placed on IR after making the initial 53. He hasn't practiced in weeks now, so we'll see. Interior, Woods, Quinnen, Jefferson, and Solomon Thomas, who I have to say, I think maybe I should have thrown him on the stock-up list because I think he's made a number of plays in preseason games.
Yeah, he's had a great preseason, so we'll throw him on there.
All right, stock up for Solomon Thomas. Linebackers, I'm going to go with, by the way, I assume you're the same?
Yeah,
right?
same.
Okay. Linebackers, I assume they're going to go with 4. I thought about going 5 here. There's a few guys that have had moments, but I'll go with 4 here. Sherwood, Mosley, Quincy, and Zaire Barnes. 4 linebackers. What about you, Michael?
Yep, I have the same.
Is there I know we have at least one other difference, but so far it's just Kuntz versus Yeboah. Corner, Sauce Reed, MC2, and Eccles. Although Eccles will be suspended for the first week, so I guess that frees up another roster spot that they can use. I'll go Jimmy Moreland instead of Bryce Hall, and then JBC, who will go to IR. I realize when Eccles gets placed on, I realize that there actually is another roster spot here for Eccles because he won't be on the initial roster. So maybe I add James here instead of Moreland, or maybe I don't know. We'll see. I have to think about that. But how's your cornerback room look?
I have Hall making it alongside Eccles, Hardy, and the starters. So yeah, I have Hall. I think he's going to be there.
Yeah, I should mention Hardy. I just lump him with the special teamers, but the last position, well, just because you mentioned Hardy, the special teams should be all the same. I threw him in there. But last position, the safeties, I have Whitehead, Tony Adams, Adrian Amos, and Trey Dean. I have Ashton Davis getting cut and only going with 4 safeties. How do you feel about that?
Do you have Dean as an initial,
Yes.
making the roster initially, not a post-cut guy? I want to do that. I just don't see where, who should I take out?
Taylor.
I could do Bodden. Yeah, Taylor.
Taylor and Bodden. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Taylor and Bodden.
I'm going to do that. So I'm going to change Taylor to post-cut, and I'm going to make Dean make it initially.
I do think there's a chance Ashton makes it. I think this is where I think the secondary I'm not as confident in. Because like you said, I do think there's a chance Hall makes it. Moreland was just kind of, out of all the corners, I felt the best about him. I almost went with James because he has that slot versatility, and Eccles is going to be out, and Eccles is the backup slot. But considering Eccles is going to be out week 1, the easy answer is to put James in here and just have, your week 1 cornerback depth chart is Sauce Reed, MC2, Moreland, and James. But I don't know. There's also, I'm kind of considering going 5 safeties here with Ashton Davis. Is that crazy?
I don't think it's crazy. I'm not going to predict it, but I don't see it happening. But it's within the realm of possibilities. He has had a nice
earned it.
Training camp. We think they're going to go light at linebacker, right, with only 4. So maybe safety, you have an extra spot there. You have an unproven starter in Tony Adams. Maybe you want the depth. So I could see it. I'm not predicting it, though.
Is there any chance they could just have the 4 corners, assuming Eccles is suspended? Or knowing Eccles is suspended week 1, is there any chance they just have Sauce Reed, MC2? I think Rich Samini's 53 was that, which was Sauce Reed, MC2, and Moreland. And those were he just had 4 corners.
Right.
Because you do have Hardy,
So, with me predicting Hall, you're saying like that? Like 4 in addition to Eccles? I think that's what they will do, right?
4 minus, yes. But yes, I'm saying week 1 just having 4 corners.
I think that's what they'll do. For just 1 game, I think they'll deal with it.
I guess so. I kind of feel like it's
a little risky.
It feels like there's another spot there in the secondary. So I don't know. I think.
Maybe that's where they don't keep a 6 receiver and they go with the corner.
No, the spot is there. That's what I'm saying. Eccles will get fucking. Of course, we've complicated things too much. We've complicated things too. I'm saying Eccles is on this initial 53 for me. but he's going to be suspended for week 1. So there's an extra spot. Do I give it to somebody in the secondary, or do we just ride it out week 1 with just Sauce, Reed, MC2, and Moreland? So I'm saying, do I bring back Craig James, who can play back, who could be the backup slot?
Are you just ignoring Hall completely? Davis? You're not even considering him on your roster?
I already made my pitch against Bryce Hall. It feels hypocritical to go back on it.
You can't tell me you trust Jimmy Moreland or Craig James more than Bryce Hall, who's actually started for a season and was
all right. You're probably true. You're probably true, but I do trust Brandon Echols more, and you only have to deal with it for one game. I don't know. I'll stick with this for now. I'm just trying to decide where Echols' roster spot goes to. It feels like maybe Ashtyn Davis does make it. Maybe they go 5 safeties. Of course, we're leaving this kind of convoluted. Let's do the practice squad guys. All right, let's do the practice squad guys, and then we'll get out of here. Okay. Because inevitably these predictions won't be right. They'll claim somebody. They'll keep some surprises. And then also the practice squad definitely won't be right. But because they'll claim somebody from other teams and whatnot. All right, I got Boyle at QB, Zonovan Knight. I'll just read them through, all right? And then you read yours, okay? If you have any thoughts, feel free to blurt them out. All right. Boyle, Zonovan Knight. At receiver, I have Jason Brownlee and Alex Erickson. At offensive line, I have Cologne and Greg Sinnat. And at tight end, I have Kenny Yeboah. If Yeboah gets claimed or whatever, then I would put EJ Jenkins on here. But I think they'll keep an extra tight end. So that's the offensive practice squad. And then defensively, I have Tanzel Smart, Bruce Hector. Oh, God, how do I pronounce his name again? Pita Omenpenu. Did I get it?
You nailed it.
No, Tau Moipenu. Pita Tau Moipenu. And Deslin Alexandre. I have linebacker Chaz Surratt and Claudin Chirilis. Corner, Craig James, Derek Langford, and at safety, Ashtyn Davis. That's Echols' spot will probably come from this practice squad, to be fair. So I'll say they activate Craig James. That's my prediction. All right, what's your practice squad?
All right, so we got Zonovan Knight, Zach Kuntz,
Irvin Charles. Boyle? Where's Boyle?
He's on there.
You're not gonna leave with the QB? You're going just.
I just have it in a random order here.
Oh, God, it's annoying. Okay, fine.
All right, should I sort it into positional order?
You know what? We've taken enough time.
A little more aesthetically pleasing. All right, Tim Boyle is number 1. He's the number 1 player in the practice squad. Irvin Charles, Jason Brownlee, Zach Kuntz, Kenny Yeboah. Actually, no. I forgot to change this because I just put Yeboah.
God damn, we can't do this.
We made that
mid. Can the season just get here?
Mid-prediction change with Kenny Yeboah.
All right, that's fine.
All right, I'll take him out.
I will say, I did notice Charles a number of times on special teams in that Giants game. He's a good gunner. So I think he does have a chance to make this team, and he made a couple of nice plays. That's a good pick. That's a good pick for the practice squad. I like that.
So EJ Jenkins, Zonovan Knight. Yeah. I got 2 tackles, Greg Sinnat and Grant Hermans. Linebackers, I got 2, Chaz Surratt and Claudin Chirilis.
Okay.
Tristan Colon, a guard. I got 2 edge defenders. Our boy Pita, Bruce Hector.
Oh, no. You got to say the last name.
All right. Pita Taumo Pinu. How's that?
Taumoipanu.
There we go. He's actually been really good. I think he had 6 pressures in this last game, which is just crazy. And I remember before the preseason started, we were looking at the roster, and we were like, these bottom of the roster defensive tackles, defensive ends are going to play a lot of snaps because the Jets are so deep that there's only going to be a few guys left who are going to be playing. And he's been one of them, and he's played really well. So I do think he'll make it if he doesn't get claimed, because I think he was one of the more productive guys in the league, really. So, yeah, I have him. I think I have Bruce Hector as well, if I didn't say him already. Tanzel Smart and Craig James.
Okay.
And you know what? Since I left that Yeboah spot open, let's put Jimmy Moreland down there.
Okay, getting Jimmy Moreland love. Okay. All right. I think that's it. We'll see what happens. Always interesting. There's always any predictions on, like, I know we just gave our predictions, but anybody you think that could be like a random surprise make? Like Tony Adams was we had kind of talked a little bit about Adams.
Super random. This has to be very outside.
I feel like the corner.
How about
spot
Irvin Charles? What about that? Like he's like you said, he's been getting early gunner reps.
Yeah, that's a surprising one. I could see it.
He just had that one rep where he didn't fight for the ball against the Bucks. I feel like the coaches wouldn't have liked that. unless he had a good excuse where he's like, I couldn't see it in the light or something.
Yeah.
Although, is
Yeah.
that a good
That
excuse?
doesn't sound
I
like
don't know.
that's a bad excuse. That's definitely not a good excuse. Yeah, I think the surprise is going to be in the cornerback room. I think they're going to cut Hall, and it's going to be one of these corners between Moreland, James, Langford. One of those guys I think is going to make the roster. And then I guess, yeah, I mean, we talked about it for a while, but when Eccles is suspended, I think another one's going to make it. So I think that's my bold prediction is Hall gets cut, which maybe isn't too bold these days. But cutting both Hall and Davis frees it nearly, what is it, $5.5 million? That's not nothing.
Yeah,
So I think
could have some value.
the end is near for most of Joe Douglas's 2020 draft class. All right, that'll do it for us. We'll be back. Depends when the final 53 is out with the practice squad and the guys going to IR and whatnot. That should be done. 4 p.m. Tuesday. So then probably Wednesday. So assuming they have the practice squad Wednesday night, we can record Wednesday night, come out Thursday morning. If it doesn't happen until Thursday, maybe we'll record Thursday and it comes out Thursday night. But sometime towards the end of this week. And then finally, we get to just prepare for games. I love doing game previews on this podcast and talking about actual football. And we don't have to do any more of these stupid roster predictions that we keep fucking up. So thank you, everybody, for listening. You can follow us at UHA Pod on Twitter. Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. We post other podcasts there. If you can, rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. I think that's it. Michael, last thoughts.
So I just pulled up the 2020 draft class, and if Ashton Davis and Bryce Hall do both get cut, Becton is the last man standing from that class. And Cameron Clark, which I was also going to say that, your fourth round tackle who never played a game still lasted longer than the majority of the draft class. So that's not always ideal.
We'll see. I do think Davis. I don't know. I kind of feel like Davis has a better chance than Hall for some reason. I feel like Davis has actually performed, and I think Hall. I just think that limitation's
really low
there.
Bryce Hall. I would be surprised if they do what you said they would do. Keep one of those other guys over Hall. I would personally be surprised. So that would count for me.
We'll see. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Rudy, for listening. Have a great week. 2 weeks until actual Jets football. Cannot wait. Finally got the throwback Rodgers jersey, so we'll be rocking that. Michael and I will both be in the house for week 1. Absolutely cannot wait. We'll have a number of podcasts coming out before then. And this is the longest time of the season, it feels like. These 2 weeks between cutout day and the start of the season. Especially it's a little longer this year, but it'll be worth it. Very excited. Everybody have a great week. Be back on Thursday. Didn't sound very confident. Thursday morning and Thursday night, we'll see. Have a great week.
At some point.